Hey everyone, good morning. It is Katan from bossbayblog.com, and I am here to talk about how to set professional and personal boundaries without anger or hostility. So, what I'm going to do is let's first, I don't know why my website, sorry guys, my website wasn't showing up. Excuse me. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So this morning I'm talking about how to set professional and personal boundaries without anger or hostility. And the reason why I chose to talk about professional and personal boundaries is because it carries into both areas of your life, and how you stand up for yourself personally translates into how you stand up for yourself professionally. So I feel that it's extremely important. And when I say extremely important, I mean like imperative that you start to create those habits in your personal life, and it will translate into your business life, because how you feel about yourself and how you value yourself, it translates into everything that you do in your life. So whether you're the CEO, whether you're working a 9 to 5, it's going to translate. And whether you're in the corporate environment, it's going to translate when you go to work, how you feel about yourself, your value that you hold to yourself. So how to set professional and personal boundaries without anger or hostility. Um, Here's what the first thing that you have to understand. When I'm saying without anger or hostility, I'm talking about on your end. I'm talking about how do you set these boundaries without you becoming angered or without you becoming hostile. I'm not talking about the other person and how they respond. Because in many cases, when you set clear boundaries, people don't respond positively. Not all cases, but in many cases, you're not always going to be met with the best responses. Sometimes people respond with an urge to try to push further past your boundary because that's an internal issue they have within themselves. Sometimes people respond with hostility and passive aggressiveness. Sometimes people respond with being intentionally disruptive. You can't control other people. So, the first step to setting professional and personal boundaries without anger or hostility is understanding that we are talking about your anger and hostility. We are not talking about them, because we are not responsible for how they feel about your boundaries. Okay. And I even went ahead and brought up some definitions of boundaries for anyone that needs that clarity, because oftentimes I feel like people move and navigate talking about things, and we don't talk enough about the definition, what it means in the dictionary, so that we understand what specific concept we're referring to. So, a boundary, a line that marks the limit of an area, a dividing line. Okay, so that's one way to describe it. Now, let's look at some more. The limits, the guidelines, or physical and emotional lines that define acceptable behaviors and protect an individual's well being in relationships. They establish where you end and where others begin, functioning as rules for self regulation rather than for control over others. Key types include physical, emotional, intellectual, sexual, and material boundaries. Use examples of boundaries. Boundaries are applied in daily life to promote healthy, respectful interactions. Physical saying, I am not comfortable with hugs. I prefer a handshake. Time/work. Turn off work notifications at 5 p.m. to protect personal time. Emotional, stating, I understand you are upset, but I cannot take on your stress right now. Material, I cannot lend you my car, but I can help you find a rental. Intellectual, disengaging from a conversation that turns disrespectful or condescending. Digital, not responding to work emails on weekends. Synonyms of boundaries: limits, dividing lines, frontiers, guidelines, constraints, edges, rules. Types of boundary structures: healthy, firm but flexible, based on self worth; rigid, unyielding, cold, distancing; porous, weak, blurry, and easily violated. Now, I've shared all of these from a definition. This is one definition that I searched up off of Google. Um, One of them came from LA Concierge Psychologist. Another one came from the Webster Dictionary. So these are just some definitions of boundaries, right? I just want to talk about it because at the end of the day, I feel that it's important for us to discuss, you know, what it is that we're referring to when we talk about this. So now that we've gone through some definitions and talked a little bit about what boundaries are from the dictionary definition, but also from other sources. And you can continue to look at these sources on your own, do your own research. But I just wanted to set the tone. Um, how you set your personal and professional boundaries without anger and hostility is understanding that you are not in control of how someone else responds or feels about your boundaries. Like it said in there, it's not about controlling another person, it's about letting people clearly understand where the boundaries and where the lines cross. So, where you're stopping, where the line is drawn. Sometimes setting boundaries and honoring boundaries don't have to be loud. And in many cases, we make it louder than what we have to make it, which causes us to feel anger, causes us to feel hostile, causes us to feel stressed out. And in reality, we don't have to think about that because if you just set the boundary and let that be it, you go from there. You enforce the boundary after you set it and you move on. How you communicate, there's different ways. Like it said, you can be cold, rigid, which you might not want to be that, but you can also be clear, healthy, firm, flexible based off of your self worth, is what it said on there. But I just want to say that the first step is understanding you cannot control anybody else, and all you can control is how you communicate the boundaries. So, being pleasant, being professional, being in a place where you are able to receive and provide information on your boundaries, that is extremely important. You're not going to be perfect at this, but you can start practicing now so that when you are in situations where you have to set a boundary in personal life or in professional life, you can do that without feeling anger. So one way that I set boundaries without feeling anger or hostility is I don't I don't immediately react. There will be things that people might say or do that really do irritate me, but I don't immediately react. I don't allow it to anger me. I say, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable about this, or I don't like the way this is making me feel. What is that emotion? I have to figure out what my emotion is. After I figure out why I feel the way that I do about something, I decide on how I want to receive it or what level of access I want to give it to my life. If I don't want to give it any level of access, then that's an option as well. But I wait, take some time before you just go and, react off of this. So you sit down, you analyze what your emotion is. Once you have identified that emotion, you decide on how you are accountable for making sure that it does not happen again for this same reason. So, a perfect example when it comes to me, one of the boundaries that I have is I don't do conversations about work in non work environments. So, we're not sitting down in a consult. If you haven't sent a message to our business website, if you have not sent a text or wherever to our business platforms, I will not be doing that. And the reason why I will not be doing that is because it's too hard to keep track of for multiple people. So it starts off simple and easy and, nothing, it's not a negative intention. But once that grows, once that clientele grows and first you have one or two people sending you messages, but once you got like 3, 4, 5, and then it goes to 10, 20, 30 people sending you DMs about business communication outside of your business hours and stuff, it's okay if they send it, but that's not where I'm going to be taking care of business. I take care of business on my website, on my business line, on my scheduled consultations where we are intentional about sitting down and planning time to do this. I had to set that boundary for myself because I came from a work environment where it was very unhealthy and it was normal to just always be near your phone and ready to pick up and start working and drive to work, no matter what you were doing, no matter how you were feeling, because in all actuality, sometimes I worked with leaders who didn't care about what you were doing and how you were feeling. They just felt like you need to be here working and that's what you need to be doing. Instead of saying we need to be training you on how to create a system so that you don't have to be here working, it's more so focused on you just got to make it happen. You just got to be there. And I think there's a balance. So for me, I had to learn how to create that balance as I became an entrepreneur because I still had that unhealthy way of working nonstop during work hours. And I had to learn how to shut that off. And I had to learn how to say, okay, this is a great conversation. We'll talk about it in our next meeting. Because just like we need to take pauses, our brains have to take pauses. And I don't ever want to be responsible for having a conversation with someone about business outside of my business hours when my brain is not focused on that and giving them half-hearted advice or consulting because I'm not thinking clearly or straight, or I'm not giving myself enough time to process what they are asking of me. And that is what will occur when we start rushing processes. So for that reason, I set my own boundaries. And I've had times where I've set the boundary and people will continue to try to break or push past the boundary. I'll say, okay, Here's the business information, send it there. Still come back and try to send business information on a personal line or on a personal DM after I've already given them the website or the form or the paperwork to fill out so they can be assisted in a timely manner, but based off of the inquiries that we receive. I don't get angry about it. I used to get angry and irritated, but then I came to a place where I was like, why are you getting angry at other people for allowing them to do what you allow them to do? Saying that out loud to myself, I realized how silly that sounds. Like you're mad at someone for doing what you allow them to do. And whether they're doing it intentionally or non intentionally, I mean, it doesn't matter because you're allowing them to do it. So it's not on them. And another thing we have to understand is that a lot of times people are not intentional with trying to push past your boundaries or disrespect your boundaries. Sometimes people forget, like we have a lot on our plate and on our brains. And that's why it's your job to hold them accountable to understanding where your boundary lies. It's not their job. So if they forget that you said no business calls on Mondays and they keep calling, but you keep answering, that's not on them. That's on you. Because why do you keep answering the phone? We have to start asking ourselves those questions. Now, if they didn't forget and they did it intentionally, that's a different story. That's someone who knows you told me to do this, but I'm going to do this anyways because I feel like my wants are more important than your boundaries at this moment. People do that. It is a psychological thing that people do. And it's people of all ages and it's people of all walks of life underneath all professions that do it. Because I've seen people from people in wellness industries, self-care, fitness, to people in fashion, business. I've seen it in all. So people do that intentionally, and that is wrong. And that is an issue they have internally. But the reason why it doesn't matter that they do it intentionally or not is because at the end of the day, you are still allowing them to do it, whether it's intentional or it's not intentional. So if you tell someone no business calls on Mondays, but you keep picking up your phone on Mondays, you're telling them business calls on Mondays. Our actions have to align with our words in order for people to understand that, because I could forget that she said no business calls on Mondays, but when I call and pick up the phone, even though I forgot, and you pick it up, guess what? I'm calling back next Monday again because I'm thinking that you're open for business because you're answering me, you're helping me. It's the ways that we continue to um, push ourselves back in our boundaries because we continue to allow people to do things that are not conducive to our growth or to our boundaries. So, what setting a boundary looks like without anger or hostility is a message that says, thank you so much for calling. Business calls are not conducted on Mondays, but you can call Tuesday through Sunday. And that voicemail sits, please leave a voicemail and call us on this date through that date. We'll make sure that when you call, we will address everything that you're concerned about. Something along those lines, whatever that layout is going to look like for you, because it's going to look different depending on who you are. So don't let people tell you it has to look one way, because there's many ways to set boundaries and to communicate. As long as you're being clear, as long as you have positive intentions, and as long as you pay attention to your delivery and you know that it's direct without unnecessary, stuff added to it. So you set that boundary. And now when people call on Mondays, you don't answer the phone. You don't answer it. You don't pick it up. You don't answer to listen. You don't look at the messages. You do not answer it. You do not touch it. You do not mess with it. You come back on Tuesday and you do what you said you were going to do from Tuesday to Sunday. That is how we set boundaries without anger or hostility. We simply follow through with what we say we're going to do. And we allow other people to either support that and fall in line because no one is bigger than the program, or we allow other people to leave that and go find someone else that makes sense for them. And that's just that simple. So those are the way we set boundaries. It's just that simple. We communicate. And we accept that after we communicate it, it's not up to us how someone feels about it or what they perceive it to be. Because by you saying, I don't take business calls on Mondays, someone else who has internal issues might say, oh, she thinks she's better than me. When in reality, it has nothing to do with you thinking you're better than a person. It has to do with you taking care of yourself mentally and physically. But because they are so self-centered, because they have their own internal insecurities, that's what they're translating that into. instead of just asking for clarity. Nobody wants to really ask that because that's embarrassing to ask for some people. It would be embarrassing for me to ask, I'm going to be honest. But for some people, asking, do you think you're better than me? That's embarrassing. So they're not going to ask you that directly. They're just going to think it in their head and they're going to move towards you or against you like they think that there's a problem. When in reality, there is no problem. And you setting your boundaries has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with you and taking care of yourself. And the more people understand that and take themselves out of the equation and stop being offended by stuff that has nothing to do with them, the easier their lives will be. But everybody's not going to understand that. And you can't be responsible for making them understand it. You have to simply be responsible for setting the boundary, communicating the boundary, and leaving it there. And that's it. It's just that simple. So you just have to be able to do that. Another thing we're going to keep in mind when it comes to the work environment, if you're working in a 9 to 5 in corporate job, it's important to understand that boundaries does not equate to over explaining yourself. You can set a boundary clearly, directly, and efficiently without giving them a whole life story as to why it's that way. Because when you start to over explain yourself, people mistake you over explaining yourself for you not having security in yourselves or confidence. It's sad that they do, but a lot of people do. So we're not going to do the over explaining. We're going to set the boundary clearly and we're going to move on with our lives. And they're going to accept it and respect it and embrace it, or they're going to not respect it, disrespect it, whatever you want to call it, and move on to somebody else that's going to allow them to operate the way that they feel they want to operate. Whether that's good for that person or not is not your business. But what is your business is that you are clear with them what's good for you. So in the corporate realm, when you first started a job, you need to be clear about what you're able to provide, what you're concerned about, or questions that you might have. Yeah, you want the job, but don't just be saying anything to get it. Find a job that makes sense for you. Even though you might want it, you got to accept that the way that they do things may not be the way you want to do stuff. And you have to make the decision to either show up the way they're wanting or to go find a different job. But you cannot get the job and then start complaining about the way that they're doing things, knowing that these were the expectations before. Because at that point, you're not holding your own self accountable. So when you show up to these jobs, you show up with clarity. I'm here because I want to work Monday through Friday. I'm available from 9 p.m. to 5 p.m. That's my availability. And if they start to pry and ask further questions, oh, well, why? Or, that's my availability. However, when I do work 9 to 5, I'm ready to work hard. Whatever it is you're needing me to work on, I can do it. But I'm available from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And another thing you want to do is if you know that you're available from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., you need to make your availability from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. or from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. You need to do it like that because you know that people are going to want to do what? Push past boundaries. So what we don't want to do is be waiting at 5 p.m. to leave because you told them you were supposed to leave at 5 p.m. and they're still holding you, still trying to have conversation, still trying to move through stuff. No, we need to be able to say, hey, it's getting close to that time, getting close to 4 p.m. Is there anything else you want me to do before I leave at 4? Communicating, that's what we need to be doing. But once you set those dates, those are your dates. Don't start accepting anything other than that. If they say, oh, we just really need you to come in today, it's an emergency. If you cannot come in and it is not the availability that you agreed upon when you started working, do not come in. Let them find it on their own. It's not your responsibility. I'm saying that as a hiring manager. Yes, you may want to, be a team member and stuff, and that's okay. But if you're unable to do stuff, you're unable to do it. And the moment you start overcommitting is the moment that you start under delivering. So don't do that. Just accept where you're at and don't try to be superwoman. Tell people what you're able to do and do that 100%. And what you are unable to do, do not commit to. Because what happens is people will come back and try to pin things not working or not happening on you when in reality, that wasn't even your original commitment. That happens a lot in the corporate environment. So I just want to remind people who are in the 9 to 5 realm, corporate area, don't feel like you have to over explain yourself. If you are sick and you need to take a sick day, you don't need to explain what you're sick with. Your employers are not doctors. You need to go to the doctor and get a doctor's note, and then you need to give them that doctor's note. And then you need to go about your sick business and go lay down somewhere or go rest or do whatever it is that you feel you want to do. If you're sick and you have the flu, okay, but you don't have anybody to go get you some food. Somebody says, well, I saw you out at a restaurant. That's none of their business. And if you have a doctor's note that shows that you were sick, guess what? you're covered. You cannot feel like you have to over explain yourself, even though sometimes people try to make you feel that way. You got to get out of that, and you have to start accepting that a boundary is simply that. It's a boundary. Draw the line, move on. Sometimes people will get it, sometimes people don't get it. When they don't get it, don't make that your personal issue. Don't make that your personal quest to try to make them understand it. Don't keep repeating yourself. You don't have to keep repeating yourself. You can simply move on to the next thing. And it's just that simple. And you have to choose. I had situations where I've told someone, I don't want to talk about business. I don't want to do consultations and during my after hours because I'm not scheduled for it. I'm not getting paid for it, and I'm tired. That person said, okay. And then a couple of weeks later started asking me questions and want to talk about business during after hours. What did I do? I just stopped responding. I stopped responding. I already expressed to you what my boundary was. And you can go back and reinforce. You can say, hey, these aren't our office hours. This is the time that I'm available. Um, and sometimes people will listen and sometimes they won't. But once they show you that they won't, you just got to accept that that's where they're at and just not try to argue with them. Don't try to keep pushing it. You've already told them they're going to choose to listen or they're not going to choose to listen. And it's not your responsibility. We try to make everything our responsibility in this life, and it's not. Do what you're supposed to do for yourself. Do it at 100%, and let people do what they're going to do for themselves, and just move on. So that is how you can set boundaries without anger or hostility. Because I promise you that when you start to accept your own boundaries and honor your boundaries, you're going to have a much happier and much higher quality of life, because you're living in your truth. You're treating yourself the way you deserve to be treated, and you're putting yourself first. When you're not living by and honoring your boundaries, you're not putting yourself first. So you're going to feel miserable, but you need to start creating those boundaries. And again, I'd like to end with a boundary isn't something that you do to try to control someone. That's more manipulative, I would say. Um, a boundary is what you do to set a limit so that you are protecting yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, financially, whatever it might be. That is the boundary that you set. But you're not here to control other people. You're here to control yourself, control your controllables, and that's it. I hope you enjoyed this live. I hope it was a reminder to take care of yourself, to put yourself first, to understand that you can create boundaries and communicate effectively, and what people do with it and how they perceive it is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to continue growing and elevating the way that you deliver those boundaries, the way that you communicate them. You don't have to be hostile. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to have attitude. It doesn't have to be passive aggressive. Just a nice, simple, hey, just so you know, this is my boundary. And let it be that. You don't have to do anything extra with that. That's it. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll be back with another live in just one moment.